Well, thank you. It's a hard act to follow. Everybody that's already spoken before me has talked about everything that I was going to talk about. So, and that's quite seriously the case. So I'm not sure, what I'm going to wing it and talk about a few things. But can I begin by acknowledging that we're on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional owners of this area, and pay respects to their elders, past and present, but also to recognise their youth, as we should for all youth, who are going to be our future leaders, the custodians of our stories, our cultures, our languages, our histories. And so it's really important, and as you know all too well, for us to grow up our youth in a way that they will become the leaders that we really need to see into the future. And I think the other thing that I like to always mention is that we've got to learn from our youth, because our youth do think differently to us, and they act very differently, and they're generally much better at all the IT than what we are, and they lead us along the way. I could talk about what's already been spoken about. I wanted to talk about students. I wanted to talk about the need for really getting quality students over here, and about our relationship with India. So I thought I'd just start and take us a bit back in history. And back in 94 and 95, there weren't any education counsellors internationally, but in that period we sent, the government, Australian government, sent 5 of us overseas. I went to India, colleagues went to KL, Jakarta, Bangkok and KL. And so we were the forerunners to go and establish the education market in the countries. When I went to India, there were about 800 students a year coming to Australia. The international export was about just close to $900 million a year, less than $1 billion. And as we heard the good minister say, it's now well and truly over 19 billion. So it's a very, very significant export for Australia. And hopefully, in part of that export is that we provide, great skills and capacities for our students who come over here to go back and work in their own countries. And we've got to have that social justice look at it from the Australian perspective, to recognise that it's more than just an export industry, and we need to treat it as more than an export industry. But in going over there, I worked with and I recognise that many of our colleagues from India who are here will recognise people like Bani Siddharth, who was in the office there, and helping kick it off, Sheil Nuna, who was there. One of Amanda's staff, who's still there, Ani Siddharth, she was recruited in, I think, 97, and is still there. And there was mention that I went back to India last month, and thank you, Rahul and the AAERI executive for inviting me back for this great celebration, because it was an opportunity to go to the High Commission, and a couple of things. One was to see how much it had changed. Most things had changed. The apartment that Amanda and I didn't share together, but we both lived in the same apartment at different times, had even changed. But generally the High Commission had changed, but what was really stable there was in fact AAERI, who's been there and held a fairly steady course all the way through. But it was also good to see, I think I counted close to 20 staff at the Australian High Commission in various roles who've been there since 95 when I was there. And there are very few organisations in our nation, of Australia, who could say that they've got people who have that commitment to one organisation to be able to work, and the breadth and the wealth of knowledge that those people hold, and the corporate history about these events. But anyhow, that was then. It was also very interesting, and looking at these figures that Alice had put up, to see the big shift, because the 800 students were primarily, a good number were scholarship, but there were a lot of vet students coming over in those days, and to turn it around to higher ed now is a fantastic achievement. There's part of the role, and I think it's worth thinking about before I get on and talk a bit about AAERI, was that it was in an environment where countries like India were considered very difficult countries for visas, and there were quite a number around, and so the role of us as counsellors coming into these countries was to work with the visa office to try and assist them in identifying who were genuine students, looking at the procedures to make sure that they were all correct, and that took years, and it was really a challenging time. It wasn't only India, but we had Vietnam, a bit later China. Indonesia was always considered pretty safe, but other countries were safe in the sense that students were genuine students. There was always a question as to whether the students from India were genuine. But in that time, the US and the UK were getting the bulk of students out of India. It was very difficult to compete with the US because they were able to get the green card, so that was a real big attraction for the higher ed students, and particularly most of the postgraduate students would go over there because there was a chance to be able to stay on. And it was through those sort of engagements that we were able to influence the Australian government to think about giving concessions to people who had studied here with extra points to be able to qualify for permanent residency over here. So a lot of this happens behind the scenes, and it was at that very time when we were over there starting to raise awareness. And in 1996, when Amanda Vanstone was the Minister for Education, we had a big event called New Horizons in India. And at that time, and I'm not even sure if it's been surpassed yet, we being Australia, conducted the biggest foreign education conference held in India. And most of our universities and vet sector came over. There were probably close to 2,000 people at that conference. A great opportunity to profile Australia, but a great opportunity then to reignite the relationships that were a bit waning. And that sort of prompted a big interest in coming over here, and that's when I started to work with some of the senior agents, and they're still here. 20 years down the track, they're still involved in the process. It's just absolutely mind-boggling and fantastic. I won't go through them all because I'll forget them all, but I remember Prof Kumar was there, really running it. Ravi was around a little bit later than that. But it was a good time, and what I realised was that with every opportunity that comes, you're going to get some very creative operators out there to look at how we can get people over. And so I raised with some of the senior agents about forming a group like AAERI, and mainly to get some good ethical practices to understand, and there was nothing around of its equivalent, but it was a very important one. And what was really gratifying was that people were very keen to embrace the idea, and said yep, and the whole idea, and it's still practiced now, is that if we can work together, we can preserve a really important business for a lot of people, and both offshore and onshore, and so that's how AAERI started. We met at the High Commission. We started to thrash out what might be good ethical practices, and also got, and it was really good to hear Alice talk, because that was one of the things that I introduced over there, was to get the visa office to be a little bit more open with agents, because there was always a little standoffish, because we didn't want to get too close in that relationship. And but in my view, if the more information we can share with each other, the better the relationship goes. And then if anybody wants to misbehave, then they've got no excuse of saying they didn't know. And so that relationship grew, and all members of the High Commission got involved, and we saw it as a very corporate effort. And and then we progressively went around India to engage with the other agents. Ravi mentioned, and I think it's a real important point, is the good work that's done in India in referring students over and getting them over here to be totally undermined when they get here by domestic agents who will then refer and poach students and so forth. Is an issue that we have to look at, and that's really an issue that is the responsibility of the education providers here to look at and make sure that they've got the ability to be able to control their agents, and that's where I get back to. It's got to be more than just a formal economic transaction. It's got to be one that's got to look at this as a sector, as an industry that has a great life, and a lot of people benefit by it, and we need to know. And as a Chancellor, I fully understand the pressures of universities to get more students in, but we've got to do it responsibly. And I say that it's not always universities. There are some universities that are challenging, but it's the other sectors that we've got to look at, and that's the important bit, I guess, in this whole process. So that was the genesis of AAERI, and it's just, I feel so proud, and when I talk to the guys, and India was an opportunity to really touch base with a lot of our faces and friends, to know that it's still, not only is it surviving, but it's growing, and the international, it's international reach, because the work that they're now doing with Nepal and trying to get into establish a similar operation in Bangladesh, are really important initiatives. And as Rahul said, that if they can offer a lot to us as institutions and as a source country, and it's important. I'll just touch on a couple of other things that are involved, because I think the relationship that was mentioned, I think Amanda mentioned, the good relationship that exists now through the Australia-India Council and so forth, and that still does happen, and it's always good, and I still get invited to events through DFAT when we've got Indian dignitaries coming over, and the cohort of people that have served in India from the Australian side is still alive and well, and it's really interesting that I was the first, but we now have two other long-serving diplomats from India, in Peter Varghese and Bill Twaddell, who have now both been appointed Chancellors, one at James Cook and the other at University of Queensland. So we're the little trio well, we're the only three diplomats anyhow, former diplomats, but all having served in India amongst all the Chancellor group, which is a fairly exciting bit. And the other important one that I'm very proud of a relationship that we've been able to appoint for the first time to an Australian university a Vice-Chancellor of Indian origins, and Professor Deep Saini at the University of Canberra, who hails from Ludhiana, is now our Vice-Chancellor, and we're very proud of that, and we share many good stories, and that relationship will grow. The other very exciting bit of news, and it's in very early development stages at the moment, but you might have heard during the Olympics, India didn't do so well at the last Olympics, and so there was a fairly big call when I was over there in India to do something, and since August, since the close of the Olympics, we've now had a delegation from India come over and looking at the University of Canberra and another university to assist them to develop up a sports university in India, and so that's a long way to go, but the early stages. So we want to be able to maintain those relationships as we go along. Just quickly, I think as far as relationships go, I think what India is lacking, and I attempted to do it but didn't get to do it, and I think both the agents and the institutions have a responsibility to do, and that is to really formalise an alumni association, or to be able to look at a cohort. And I was very fortunate when I went to Vietnam was to establish the Vietnam Graduates from Australia Club, and that now, if you work in Vietnam, you know how robust they are as a group with close to 7,000 members now, and the Australian institutions do spend a lot of time and effort supporting the work of the Vietnam graduates, and they also provide a lot of support back to Australia, both the business sector and the university sector in looking at employment opportunities and so forth. So, and I think the work of Julie Bishop, Minister Bishop, in trying to establish a similar alumni within Australia is really good. So look, I won't go on. I know dinner's waiting, and but to finish off by saying, I'm very proud. I feel very privileged that I was invited back to help AAERI celebrate. And I learned one thing. I'd asked people over the years, what's happening with AAERI, and Australian institutions, they sort of didn't get it. What I was talking about, and I think I know why after listening to Minister Birmingham. I should have said AAERI, and maybe they understood. But when I started talking about Neighbours Association, people could relate to it. So it's maybe that's just a little bit of marketing that we need to do to raise the profile of what AAERI is versus AAERI, and do it. But I think the Minister is very genuine in what he says, and we should be pressing. And universities and institutions over here need to also press with government and every opportunity to be able to talk about the virtues of groups like AAERI, well, they're the only group, and the value that they can add, the value add that they can give to the international education system, and the capacity to be able to contribute to the development of policies. And advice is cheap. But good advice is very valuable for the sector. Thank you for the invitation to come and celebrate this 20th year. 25th year will be great, and we'll see how that goes. And happy Diwali to everybody. Thank you.
Jessica, please come here. We'll do the business card draw now. Dr. Calma.
Oh, what if I draw mine?
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Ooh. No, that's bullshit, eh? You saw it? I did it very... This is hard to believe, but...
Professor Tom Calma.
Only good one.
We'll do another one, but that's Tom Calma.
No.
He knows the feel of the card,
No, I didn't braille one.
Okay. Dr. Don Owens, AM, Chair. Copy. Jessica. Give it to her.
Right.
Thank you. If I pull my name again, I'll put more than one,
Michael Fay, Director, AFG Ventures. And Dr. Calma has given this to me. Thank you.
That's right. but I should say, one of the things that I also did over there was to make sure that none of our brochures got wasted, like every other year they get wasted, and it just reminded me in the business card drawer was that we donated to the Blind Institute in India. And so a lot of our Australian brochures all became brochures that were created in Braille. And so even after the year, that instead of being destroyed, they were put to good use.
Dr. Calma, please give away the AAERI sheet to Alice McLean, Director, DIBP, please.
Come through.
Could I call upon Dr. Amanda Day, Councillor? Could I call Consulate General of India, Manika Jain, please? Thank you. Could I get our President Rahul Gandhi to please present a shield to Dr. Calma?
Good one.